The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood in the command center of New Seoul Station, watching the holographic display flicker to life. The alien face that appeared was unlike anything humanity had seen before. It had blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water, large black eyes that held no warmth, and a mouth that moved in ways that made his stomach turn. "Greetings, humans of Earth," the creature said. Its voice was cold and mechanical, filtered through the translation system. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Empire, speaking for the Galaxy Council. Your species has been observed and catalogued. You have been assigned Tier 7 status in the galactic hierarchy." Hyunwoo felt his jaw tighten. He had been in the military for 30 years, and he knew a threat when he heard one. Behind him, Captain So-Young Kim stepped closer to the display, her eyes fixed on the alien's face. "Your planet has consumed resources beyond your designated allocation," the ambassador continued. "Your expansion into space has been unauthorized. Your technology development has proceeded without proper oversight. These violations cannot continue." The hologram shifted, showing images of human colonies on Mars, the mining operations on Europa, and the deep space stations that humanity had built over the past 50 years. Each image was marked with red symbols that pulsed like warning lights. The Galaxy Council, in its infinite wisdom and mercy, offers you a chance to correct these violations. You will provide tribute to demonstrate your acceptance of proper galactic order. The terms are as follows. Hyunwoo watched as a list appeared beside the alien's head. His blood ran cold as he read the demands. First, you will provide 10% of your total population for labor conscription. These humans will serve the Council's member species in whatever capacity is deemed necessary. Second, you will surrender 50% of your military vessels to Council control. Third, you will redirect 90% of your industrial output to Council-designated projects. Fourth, you will cease all unauthorized space exploration and colonization. So-Young made a small sound of disgust behind him. Hyunwoo raised his hand slightly, signaling her to stay quiet. The message wasn't finished. You have 7 standard galactic cycles to comply with these terms. Failure to do so will result in corrective action being taken against your species. This message serves as your only warning. The Council's patience is not infinite. The hologram flickered and died, leaving the command center in stunned silence. "Sir," So-Young said quietly, "did they just demand that we give them slaves?" Hyunwoo turned away from the display, his mind racing. "That's exactly what they demanded. 10% of our population. That's 800 million people." The numbers were staggering. Not just the people, but everything else. Half their fleet meant losing the ships that protected their colonies. 90% of their industry meant humanity would barely be able to feed itself, let alone defend against threats. "Get me President Han on a secure channel," Hyunwoo ordered, "and contact all fleet commanders. I want a full military assessment within the hour." As So-Young moved to carry out his orders, the command center doors burst open. Chief Engineer Tae-Ho Lee rushed in, his uniform wrinkled and stained with grease. His usually neat black hair was disheveled, and his eyes were bright with exhaustion and excitement. "Admiral, we got the message too," Tae-Ho said, breathing hard. "Every human outpost in the system received it. But, sir, I need to tell you something. Project Defiance is ready." Hyunwoo felt a spark of hope. Project Defiance had been humanity's most classified research program for the past 5 years. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. "How ready?" The prototype passed all tests yesterday. Dr. Yunji says we can begin full implementation immediately if needed. Tae-ho glanced around the command center, then lowered his voice. Sir, what they're asking for, it's not tribute. It's surrender. Complete surrender. I know what it is, Hyunwoo said grimly. He had seen conquered species before, in the historical records they had discovered when humanity first developed faster-than-light travel. The pattern was always the same. First came demands for tribute, then came occupation. Finally came assimilation, or extinction. The secure communication system chimed, and President Mi Young-han's face appeared on the main screen. Even through the static of the quantum relay, Hyun-woo could see the strain in her features. Admiral, I assume you've seen the Council's message, she said without preamble. Yes, Madam President. I'm calling an emergency session of the Defense Council. Already done. I need you here on Earth within 12 hours. We're facing the biggest decision in human history. She paused, and her expression hardened. They want to turn us into a slave species, Hyun-woo. They want to break us down and parcel us out like property. What are you thinking, Madam President? I'm thinking about what my grandfather used to say. He fought in the Korean War, back when Earth was still divided. He told me that there are some things worth dying for, and freedom is at the top of that list. Hyun-woo nodded slowly. He had heard similar words from his own grandfather, who had served in the same conflict. I'll prep my ship for immediate departure. Bring Captain Kim and Chief Lee with you. If we're going to make this decision, I want all our best people involved. The connection ended, leaving the three of them alone in the command center. Outside the viewport, Hyun-woo could see the busy traffic of human ships moving between the station and Earth. Cargo vessels, passenger liners, research ships, and patrol craft moved in orderly patterns that represented decades of human expansion into space. All of it would be gone if they accepted the Council's demands. Tae-ho, he said quietly. Contact Dr. Yunji. Tell her to prepare a full briefing on Project Defiance. If we're going to say no to these aliens, we need to be ready for the consequences. You think we should refuse? So Young asked. Hyun-woo looked out at the ships again, thinking about the 800 million people the Council wanted as slaves. I think we're about to find out what humanity is really made of. 3 hours later, they were aboard the Admiral's personal cruiser, racing toward Earth at maximum speed. Tae-ho had spent the entire journey on secure communications with Dr. Yunji and her research team on Luna Base. So Young reviewed military readiness reports from every human outpost in the system. The numbers aren't good, she reported as they entered Earth's orbit. We have maybe 200 combat-capable ships scattered across the system. Intelligence estimates suggest the Council can field thousands of vessels if they want to. It's not about the numbers, Hyun-woo replied, though, privately, he agreed with her assessment. It's about what we're fighting for. As their ship descended through Earth's atmosphere toward the capital, Hyun-woo thought about the message they had received. 7 galactic cycles. In human terms, that was roughly 3 months. 3 months to decide whether humanity would submit to slavery or fight for its freedom. The Defense Council meeting was held in the deepest bunker beneath the Capitol building. Representatives from every human colony and military command attended via hologram, their faces grim as they discussed their options. The reality is simple, said General Won-ho Kim, commander of Mars Colony's defenses. If we refuse, they'll come for us with overwhelming force. We might be able to hold out for a while, but eventually they'll crush us. And if we accept, countered Admiral Ji-hoon Park of the Outer System Fleet, we lose everything that makes us human. We become cattle for alien masters. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for negotiation, hoping to reduce the tribute demands. Others wanted to buy time while humanity prepared for war. A few suggested accepting the terms and looking for ways to resist from within the system. Finally, President Han called for silence. Dr. Choi, please brief us on Project Defiance. Dr. Yoonji Choi appeared on the main hologram, transmitting from her laboratory deep beneath Luna's surface. She was young for someone heading such an important project, barely 35, but her eyes held the intensity of someone who had spent years solving impossible problems. Project Defiance began 5 years ago when we first detected signs of galactic civilization, she began. We knew that eventually we would encounter species far more advanced than ourselves. The project was designed to give humanity an edge in that encounter. She gestured, and technical diagrams filled the display. We've developed something we call quantum resonance technology. In simple terms, it allows our ships and equipment to adapt and evolve in real time based on the mental state and determination of their human operators. What does that mean in practical terms? President Han asked. It means that a human pilot who refuses to give up can push his ship beyond its normal limits. It means that a soldier who will not retreat can make his weapons more effective. It means that our technology becomes stronger when we are most determined to use it. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. How much stronger? Admiral Hyun-woo asked. We don't know the upper limits yet, Yoonji admitted. The test results have been unprecedented. But there's a catch. The technology only works when humans are united in purpose. If we're divided, if some of us give up while others fight, the effect is minimal. President Han leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. Finally, she looked around the room at the assembled leaders of humanity. Then, our choice is clear, she said. We either all say yes and become slaves, or we all say no and fight for our freedom. There's no middle ground. The vote was unanimous. As the meeting ended and the participants began to disconnect, Admiral Hyun-woo remained behind with the president. Ma'am, you realize what we've just committed ourselves to? I do, she replied. We've chosen to bet everything on the idea that free humans are stronger than enslaved ones. Let's hope we're right. Outside, Earth continued its rotation, unaware that its children had just declared war on the galaxy itself. The journey to Proxima Prime took 2 weeks, and Ambassador Jin-Ho Kang spent every moment preparing for what might be humanity's final diplomatic act. He stood in his small cabin aboard the diplomatic vessel Soul's Hope, practicing the speech he would never give. He had written dozens of versions, eloquent explanations of human values, detailed arguments about the illegality of forced conscription under galactic law, passionate pleas for understanding and compromise. All of them sat crumpled in the waste disposal unit. In the end, President Han had been clear about humanity's message. It wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact. Captain Eugene, we're approaching the Proxima system, came the voice of his pilot over the ship's communication system. Jin-Ho looked out the viewport and felt his breath catch. Proxima Prime hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in the gleaming spires of the Galaxy Council's capital city. Ships from 1,000 different worlds moved in organized patterns around the planet, each one representing a species that had submitted to Council authority. Sir, Captain Eugene called again. We're being hailed by traffic control. They're directing us to the diplomatic docking bay. Understood. Take us in. As their small ship approached the massive space station that served as the Council's meeting place, Jin-Ho could see the scale of what humanity was up against. The station was the size of a small moon, its surface bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Ships larger than Earth's biggest cities moved around it like insects around a giant. The docking bay doors opened to reveal a space that could have held hundreds of vessels the size of theirs. They were the only ship inside. "They're making a point," Captain Yujin observed as they settled onto the landing platform. "Yes," Jin-Ho replied. "They want us to feel small and alone." 2 hours later, Jin-Ho walked alone through the corridors of the council chamber. His footsteps echoed in the vast hallways, which were designed to dwarf any visitor. The walls displayed holographic images of council member species, each one shown in poses that emphasized their power and superiority. He had been offered an escort, but he refused. If humanity was going to stand alone against the galaxy, he would walk alone to deliver their message. The council chamber itself was beyond massive. It rose up like a mountain, with thousands of viewing platforms arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking area. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the platforms, their alien forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that hurt to look at. Jin-Ho descended the long ramp to the speaking platform, aware that every eye in the chamber was focused on him. His simple black diplomatic uniform looked plain and small against the elaborate costumes and natural displays of the alien representatives. At the center of the chamber stood the council's leadership platform, where 5 beings sat in judgment over the galaxy. Jin-Ho recognized them from the intelligence briefings. The Chancellor was a massive crystalline creature from the Vegan Empire, its body glowing with internal light. Beside it sat representatives of the 4 other major powers that controlled galactic politics. "Human representative?" The Chancellor's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by technology that made it seem to come from everywhere at once. "You stand before the assembled wisdom of the galaxy. State your species' compliance with the tribute demands." Jin-Ho took a breath and looked up at the thousands of alien faces watching him. Somewhere among them might be species that had once stood where he stood now, faced with the same impossible choice. He wondered how many had chosen submission. He wondered how many had chosen to fight and lost. "Honored Chancellor," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "I come before this assembly as the representative of humanity, speaking with the full authority of our government and people." "Yes, yes," the Chancellor interrupted impatiently. "Present your tribute schedule. Our time is valuable." Jin-Ho felt a strange calm settle over him. All the preparation, all the worry, all the fear came down to this single moment. He thought of President Han's final words before he left Earth. "Remember, Jin-Ho, we're not asking for anything. We're not begging for mercy. We're simply telling them what we've decided." "The human species has considered the Council's demands," Jin-Ho said, his voice steady and clear. "We have reached a unanimous decision regarding tribute, labor conscription, fleet surrender, and industrial redirection." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant whispers and movements that had filled the space stopped as thousands of beings waited for humanity's answer. Jin-Ho looked directly at the Chancellor meeting. Its alien gaze without flinching. No. The word echoed through the chamber like a physical blow. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The concept was so alien to them that it took time to process. Then the Chancellor's crystalline body began to pulse with angry red light. "What?" Did you say? No, Jinho repeated, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. We will not provide tribute. We will not surrender our people as slaves. We will not give you our ships or our industry. We will not submit to your authority. The chamber erupted. Alien voices rose in anger, shock, and disbelief. Many of the representatives had never heard a subject species refuse council demands. The very idea was beyond their understanding. "Silence!" the chancellor roared, its voice amplified until it physically hurt. The chamber fell quiet again, but Jinho could feel the tension like electricity in the air. "You dare refuse the council's benevolent guidance?" the chancellor demanded. "Your pathetic species inhabits a single star system. You have existed in space for less than a century. You are nothing compared to the powers assembled here." Jinho remained calm. "We understand the odds, Chancellor. We know you could destroy us. But understanding the consequences doesn't change our answer." "Your answer is irrelevant," declared another council member, a reptilian creature with scales that shifted color as it spoke. "You will comply, or you will be made to comply." "No," Jinho said for the third time. "And if you want to change that, answer. You're welcome to try." The simplicity of the statement seemed to enrage the council even more than outright defiance would have. There was no desperation in Jinho's voice, no fear, no anger, just a calm statement of fact. "You will watch your species burn for this arrogance," the chancellor promised, its light now blazing so brightly that many of the alien observers had to shield their eyes. "We will make an example of humanity that will be remembered for 1,000 years." "Perhaps you will," Jinho acknowledged. "But you'll have to burn us to do it. We will not kneel." For the first time since the encounter began, one of the other council members spoke. It was a floating creature that looked like living mist, its voice like wind through empty spaces. "Human, do you understand what you have done? No species has refused council authority in over 800 years. The last to try was the Vorthon Empire. Their homeworld is now a cloud of radioactive dust." "I know the history," Jinho replied. "We studied the Vorthons before coming here. They fought alone and died alone. But they died free. And you think your fate will be different?" Jinho smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "I think our fate will be whatever we make it. That's what being free means." The council members conferred among themselves in a rapid exchange of alien languages. Finally, the chancellor spoke again. "Human representative, we offer you one final chance. Return to your people. Tell them what you have seen here. Tell them of the power. Arrayed against them. Return in one galactic cycle with their submission, and we will reduce the tribute demands by half." "There's nothing to consider," Jinho said immediately. "Our answer was decided before I came here. It won't change in a cycle or a year or a century. We said no, and we meant it." "Then you have signed your species' death warrant." "Maybe. But we've also signed our freedom charter." Jinho turned and began walking toward the exit ramp. Behind him, the council members continued to argue among themselves, their voices rising in anger and disbelief. Many of the observing species were talking excitedly, though whether in support or condemnation he couldn't tell. As he reached the chamber's exit, the chancellor's voice followed him. "Human! When your cities burn and your people scream for mercy, remember that you chose this path." Jinho paused at the doorway and looked back at the assembled representatives of galactic power. "When free humans fight for everything they hold dear, Remember that you forced us to this path. You might destroy us, but you'll learn what it costs to break a species that refuses to be broken. Back on Earth, President Mi Young-han watched the transmission from the Emergency Command Center buried beneath the Capitol. Around her, the leaders of humanity's military and government sat in stunned silence as Jin-Ho's words echoed through the room. "Well," she said finally, "we've done it. We've told the galaxy no." "Madam President," Admiral Hyunwoo said quietly, "all fleet commanders are reporting ready status. Project Defiance systems are online across the entire military. Whatever happens next, we're as prepared as we can be. How long do you think we have?" "Intelligence suggests they'll send a force within days, not weeks. They can't let our refusal go unanswered. Every subject species in the galaxy will be watching to see what happens to us." President Han nodded and activated the global communication system. Her image appeared on screens across Earth and every human colony in the system. "Citizens of humanity," she began, "today our ambassador delivered our answer to the Galaxy Council's demands. We said no to slavery. We said no to surrender. We said no to the end of human freedom." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "In the coming days, we will face the consequences of that choice. Ships will come to punish us for our defiance. Some of us may not survive what's coming, but we will face it as free humans, and we will face it together." Across the solar system, in cities and colonies and space stations, humans watched their president's words and felt something stir in their hearts. It was fear, yes, but it was also something else. Something that had been sleeping in the human spirit since their ancestors first looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them. It was the absolute refusal to bow to anyone or anything that would make them less than what they chose to be. The word that had started it all continued to echo across the galaxy. No, and in that single word, everything changed. The Council's first enforcement fleet arrived exactly 72 hours after Jin-Ho delivered humanity's refusal. They came out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a plague of metal locusts, their ships blotting out the stars. Fleet Admiral Dong-Hyun Song stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, humanity's flagship, watching the tactical display as red dots continued to multiply. Each dot represented an alien warship, and there seemed to be no end to them. "Final. Count, sir," reported Commander Ye-Jin Park, his tactical officer. 10,347 enemy vessels, 50 different species represented. We're tracking everything from Alterian battle cruisers to Zenthi swarm fighters. Dong-Hyun nodded calmly, though his stomach felt like ice. In his 30 years of military service, he had never imagined facing odds like these. The human fleet consisted of 231 ships scattered throughout the solar system. They were outnumbered more than 40 to 1. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Activate Project Defiance systems. Full authorization." "Sir," Ye-Jin hesitated. "Are you sure? We've never tested the system on this scale." "Commander, we're about to be wiped out by the largest military force in galactic history. I think it's time to test everything we have." Across the bridge, Communications Officer Soo-Jin Lee looked up from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Council fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender. Put it through." The main screen flickered, showing the bridge of an alien command ship. The creature speaking was tall and thin, with skin like polished metal and eyes that glowed with blue fire. When it spoke, its voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never been denied anything. "Human Fleet Commander, I am War Leader Zax Han of the Hegemony Third Fleet." You are completely surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick." Dong-hyun stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in the military posture he had perfected over decades of service. "War leader, I am Fleet Admiral Song of the Human Defense Forces. I'm afraid I must decline your generous offer." The alien's glowing eyes seemed to brighten with amusement. "You have fewer than 300 ships. We have over 10,000. Your surrender is not a request, human. It is an inevitability." "Perhaps," Dong-hyun agreed, "but we're going to make you work for it." "Your bravado is meaningless. We will demonstrate the futility of resistance. All ships, target the human flagship. Destroy it." The transmission ended, and immediately the tactical display lit up with incoming fire. Energy beams and missile volleys converged on the Indomitable from dozens of enemy ships. Any normal vessel would have been vaporized instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The ship's hull began to glow with a soft blue light. The enemy weapons struck the hull and simply stopped, their energy absorbed and dispersed harmlessly into space. More than that, the ship itself seemed to grow stronger, its armor plating becoming thicker and more resilient with each attack. "What the hell?" Ye-jin whispered, staring at the readings on her screen. "Sir, our defensive systems are operating at 300% of normal capacity. That should be impossible." "It's not impossible," Dong-hyun said, feeling something he had never experienced before. It was as if the ship was responding to his will, becoming what he needed it to be. "It's Project Defiance. Signal all ships to engage. Show them what humans do when we're cornered." Throughout the solar system, the same transformation was taking place on every human vessel. Captain Jae-sung, commanding the destroyer Soul's Pride near Mars, watched in amazement as his ship began to change before his eyes. New weapon systems sprouted from the hull like growing plants. Additional armor plating formed over critical areas. The ship's engines, which had been running at maximum power, suddenly found reserves of energy that shouldn't have existed. Captain, his first officer, Lieutenant Hae-won Shin, reported from her station, "Our weapons are showing impossible energy readings. We should be burning out every system on the ship, but somehow everything is working better than ever." "Then let's put it to good use," Jae-sung replied. "Target the nearest council squadron. All weapons, fire." The Soul's Pride had been built with 6 plasma cannons. When it fired, 12 beams of energy lanced out toward the enemy ships. The alien vessels, confident in their superior shielding, made no effort to evade. The human weapons struck their targets and punched through their defenses like paper. 3 alien ships exploded in brilliant fireballs. The rest of the squadron scattered in shock. "How is this possible?" Hae-won asked, staring at the tactical display. "I don't know," Jae-sung admitted. "But whatever Dr. Yoonji did to our ships, I'm grateful for it." The battle raged across the entire solar system. Near Jupiter, Captain Minho Park's cruiser Busan Defender found itself surrounded by 50 enemy ships. By all logic, it should have lasted less than a minute. Instead, it became the center of a whirlwind of destruction, its weapons reaching out to destroy enemies at impossible ranges, while its defenses turned aside attacks that should have reduced it to scrap metal. "Sir," his gunner reported, "we've destroyed 37 enemy vessels. Our weapons keep getting more powerful. It's like the ship wants to fight." Minho nodded, feeling the truth of those words. The ship did want to fight. More than that, it wanted to win. And somehow, that desire was becoming reality. On Earth, Dr. Yoonji Choi monitored the battle from her laboratory deep beneath Luna Base. The readings flooding her screens defied everything she knew about physics and engineering. The quantum resonance. Technology she had developed was working far beyond her wildest predictions. "It's not just enhancing their ships," she muttered to herself, making notes as fast as she could type. "It's rewriting the fundamental laws of how their technology works. The more determined they are to fight, the more powerful they become." Her assistant, Dr. Kyung-ho Yoon, looked up from his own console. "Dr. Choi, the energy readings from the fleet are off the charts. Some of our ships are operating at levels that should be physically impossible." "I know," Yoonji said, her eyes bright with excitement and terror. "We've tapped into something we don't understand. Human will, human determination, human refusal to give up is literally changing reality around us." Back in space, the impossible battle continued. The alien fleet, which had expected to crush humanity in minutes, found itself locked in a fight that defied all their experience. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Weapons that should have overloaded kept firing. Defenses that should have failed kept holding. War leader Zaxxon stood on his command bridge, staring at reports that made no sense. "How many ships have we lost?" "Over 4,000, war leader," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "The humans have lost only 17 vessels. This is impossible. Our intelligence said they were a primitive species with basic technology." "Their technology is basic," Zaxxon snarled. "But something is making it far more effective than it should be. All ships concentrate fire on individual targets. Don't spread our attacks. Overwhelm them one at a time." The change in tactics had some effect. Human ships began to fall under concentrated fire from hundreds of enemies at once. But each one that died took dozens of alien ships with it. The exchange rate was nothing like what the Council had expected. Captain So-Min Kim, commanding the frigate Daegu's Hope, found her ship targeted by an entire alien battle group. 200 enemy vessels poured fire into her ship from every direction. Her crew of 43 people should have died instantly. Instead, the ship's defensive systems reached levels that broke every law of physics. Energy shields that had never been installed appeared around the vessel. Armor that had been manufactured to specific thicknesses doubled and tripled in density. Weapons that had been designed for limited engagements fired continuously without overheating. "Ma'am," her chief engineer reported, "we're running on systems that don't exist. According to our ship's blueprints, half the equipment we're using was never built." So-Min felt the truth of what was happening. The ship wasn't just responding to their determination to fight. It was becoming what they needed it to be. Their refusal to surrender was literally creating new capabilities out of thin air. "Then let's use those non-existent systems to send these aliens home," she ordered. The Daegu's Hope launched a barrage that destroyed 30 enemy ships in a single volley. The rest of the alien battle group retreated in panic. As the battle entered its 18th hour, something even more remarkable happened. The human ships began to coordinate in ways that had never been programmed into their systems. Vessels on opposite sides of the solar system moved in perfect synchronization. Weapons fired in patterns that created devastating crossfires. Defenses activated at precisely the right moments to protect damaged allies. Admiral Dong Hyun, still on the bridge of the Indomitable, felt it happening. He was connected not just to his own ship, but to every human vessel in the system. He could sense their determination, their courage, their absolute refusal to surrender. And that collective will was becoming a weapon more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral," Commander Ye-jin reported, her voice filled with awe. The Council fleet is retreating. The survivors are jumping to hyperspace. Dong-hyun looked at the tactical display. Of the 10,000 ships that had arrived to punish humanity, fewer than 2,000 remained. They were fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. Casualties? He asked. 41 ships lost, sir. About 3,000 personnel. She paused, then added quietly, Sir, we just defeated the largest military force in galactic history. No, Dong-hyun said, feeling the truth of it in his bones. We just showed the galaxy what happens when free humans refuse to kneel. Across the solar system, human crews cheered as they watched the alien fleet disappear into hyperspace. But their celebration was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this defeat. They would return with even greater force. But for now, humanity had proven something that the galaxy had forgotten was possible. Sometimes, the underdog wins. Sometimes, determination matters more than numbers. Sometimes, a single word like no can change everything. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. The news of humanity's impossible victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 homes, beings who had lived their entire lives under Council rule heard the same incredible story. A Tier 7 species had said no to the galaxy's most powerful authority and survived to tell about it. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, a young Torhan named Velka stopped his work in the deep tunnels to listen to the underground broadcast. His people had been slaves to the hegemony for over 2 centuries. Their entire civilization reduced to digging precious metals from the planet's core. The humans destroyed 4,000 Council ships, the broadcaster whispered, his voice crackling through the hidden communication device. 4,000 ships, Velka. The Council hasn't lost that many vessels in 300 years. Velka's scaled hands tightened around his mining tool. Like every Torhan on the planet, he had been born into slavery, lived his life in slavery, and expected to die in slavery. The idea that someone could fight the Council and win was beyond his understanding. It can't be true, his work partner Zixmo said quietly. No one defeats the Council. No one even tries anymore. But the broadcasts kept coming. More details about the battle. Reports of Council fleets retreating from human space. Evidence that the impossible had actually happened. 3 days after the battle, Velka made a decision that would change his world forever. He stood up in the middle of the morning work assembly, in front of 5,000 Torhan slaves and their hegemony overseers, and spoke a single word. No. The overseer, a massive reptilian creature with cybernetic implants, turned its glowing red eyes toward Velka. What did you say, slave? No, Velka repeated, his voice carrying across the silent. Mining complex. I will not work today. I will not dig your metals. I will not be your slave. The overseer raised its shock weapon, the same device that had kept the Torhans in line for generations. But before it could fire, Zixmo stood up beside his friend. No, he said simply. One by one, other Torhans began to stand. The word spread through the crowd like wildfire. No! 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 Within minutes, every slave in the complex was on their feet, facing their overseers with a word that none of them had dared to speak in 200 years. The rebellion that started in that mining complex spread across the planet within hours. Torhan slaves everywhere had heard the same impossible story. If humans could say no to the Council and survive, then maybe they could too. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On Vega 7, the aquatic Merlani people stopped producing the rare gases that powered Council ships. On the agricultural world of Ceres Major, the plant-like Verdani refused to harvest food for their oppressors. In the asteroid belt factories of Proxima Beta, the insectoid Clicktar workers walked away from their assembly lines. The word that humanity had spoken to the Council became a plague that infected every subject species in known space. No. On Earth, Intelligence Director Su-Bin Lee briefed President Han on the developing situation from the secure command center beneath the Capitol building. Madam President, we're tracking rebellion on over 300 worlds. The Council's entire economic system is starting to collapse. They depend on slave labor to maintain their civilization, and that labor force is refusing to work. President Han studied the holographic display showing the galaxy-wide map. Red dots marked worlds in open rebellion, yellow dots showed unrest, and green dots indicated stable Council territory. There was a lot more red and yellow than green. How are the Council forces responding? Brutally, Su-Bin admitted. They're sending military units to put down the rebellions. Some worlds are being bombed back to the Stone Age as examples to others. But they don't have enough ships to be everywhere at once, especially after we destroyed so many of them. And the requests for assistance? 47 different rebel groups have asked for our help. They want weapons, ships, military advisors. They want us to lead a galaxy-wide revolution against the Council. President Han walked to the large window that looked out over the capital city. Even through the reinforced glass and layers of security, she could see the signs of preparation. Military convoys moved through the streets. Construction crews worked around the clock to build new defenses. The entire planet was getting ready for the war that everyone knew was coming. What's our military assessment? Admiral Hyunwoo stepped forward from where he had been listening to the briefing. We're stronger than we were before the battle, but we're still facing impossible odds. The Council has thousands of member species. Even if half their subject worlds rebel, they still have the firepower to glass every human colony in the system. But President Han could hear something else in his voice. But Dr. Yoon-ji's research suggests that Project Defiance is still evolving. The more humans refuse to surrender, the more powerful the effect becomes. And now we're not the only ones refusing. Meanwhile, in her laboratory on Luna Base, Dr. Yoon-ji Choi was making discoveries that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics. The quantum resonance technology had performed far beyond her calculations during the battle. But the readings she was getting now were even more incredible. Dr. Yoon, look at these numbers, she called to her assistant. The quantum field that surrounds our ships isn't just responding to human determination anymore. It's picking up similar emotions from other species. Dr. Kyung-ho Yoon studied the data on his screen. Are you saying that the Torhan Rebellion is somehow making our technology stronger? That's exactly what I'm saying. Every time someone, somewhere, in the galaxy, decides to stand up and say no to oppression, it feeds back into the quantum field. We're all connected somehow. Human defiance is inspiring others to be defiant, and their courage is making us stronger. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had started a galactic revolution. And every act of rebellion, every moment of courage, every refusal to submit was making the next act easier. Back on Kepler 442b, the Torhan Rebellion was entering its second week. Velka, who had never expected to live through his first act of defiance, found himself leading the resistance movement for his entire world. The hegemony forces had tried to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force, but something unexpected was happening. The primitive weapons that the Tor hands had cobbled together from mining equipment were working far better than they should. Improvised. Explosives were destroying military vehicles built to withstand direct hits from heavy weapons. Communication devices made from spare parts were somehow penetrating the most advanced jamming systems the hegemony possessed. "It's as if the universe itself wants us to be free," Velka told his lieutenants as they planned their next strike. "Our weapons shouldn't work this well. Our defenses shouldn't hold against their attacks. But they do." What Velka didn't know was that his determination and the determination of millions like him across the galaxy was creating a feedback loop with humanity's quantum resonance technology. Every time he refused to give up, every time he chose freedom over safety, he was adding his will to a growing wave of defiance that stretched across the stars. The Council's response was predictable and brutal. War leader Zaxxon, still smarting from his defeat at human hands, was given command of the pacification forces, tasked with crushing the rebellions. His orders were simple: make examples of rebel worlds until the others surrendered. He started with a small agricultural planet called Haven's Rest, home to a peaceful species called the Gentle Ones. When they refused to resume food production for the Council, Zaxxon's fleet turned their green world into a ball of radioactive glass. The message was broadcast across the galaxy. This is what happens to those who say no. But instead of crushing the rebellion, the destruction of Haven's Rest only made it stronger. Species that had been hesitating joined the revolt. Worlds that had been considering submission chose resistance instead. The Council's brutality reminded everyone exactly why they were fighting. On Earth, Captain Gunwoo Nam received his new orders with grim satisfaction. A former military officer who had volunteered for deep space exploration, he had been living on the frontier colony of New Jeju when the rebellion started. Now he commanded a small fleet of armed merchant vessels, running supplies to rebel worlds despite the Council blockade. "Captain," his first officer, Lieutenant Dae-Young Park, reported from the bridge of their ship Freedom's Call, "We're approaching the Kepler system. Council patrol ships are blocking all the major shipping lanes." "Take us through the asteroid." "Field," Gunwoo ordered. "If we can't go around them, we'll go through them." As their small convoy of ships navigated the dangerous asteroid field, Gunwoo thought about the cargo they were carrying: medical supplies for the wounded, weapons for the fighters, food for the hungry, and most importantly, hope for those who had forgotten what freedom felt like. When a Council patrol intercepted them at the edge of the field, Gunwoo's response had become famous throughout the rebel networks. "Council vessel, this is Captain Nam of the Free Transport Freedom's Call. You're ordered to heave to for inspection and cargo confiscation." "Council ship," Gunwoo replied calmly. "This is a free human vessel carrying aid to free beings. You want our cargo? No. You want us to stop helping others? No. You want us to bow to your tyranny? Hell no." The battle that followed was brief but decisive. The human ships, enhanced by the same technology that had won the Battle of Saul, destroyed the patrol vessels and continued on their mission. Stories like Gunwoo's spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring new acts of defiance. The word no had become more than just a refusal. It had become a battle cry, a symbol of hope and a promise that freedom was possible. But the Council wasn't finished. Even as rebellions raged across their territory, they were gathering their strength for a final, decisive blow. If they couldn't maintain control through fear and brutality, they would try extinction. The second enforcement fleet was already assembling. This time, they weren't coming to conquer humanity. They were coming to destroy it completely, hoping that the death of the species that had started the rebellion would break the will of all the others. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the word no would be enough to survive what was coming next. 6 months after humanity first said no to the Galaxy Council, the cost of that defiance was becoming clear. Earth's outer colonies were under constant attack, and the casualty reports that reached President Han's desk grew longer each day. The morning briefing in the underground command center felt heavier than usual. Admiral Hyunwoo stood at the holographic display, pointing to red markers that indicated lost territories. New Tokyo Station fell yesterday after a month-long siege, he reported, his voice tired. Colonel Sung-min Bayek held the station until the end. His final transmission was typical of our people. President Han looked up from the casualty reports. What did he say? Tell Earth we never said yes, Admiral Hyunwoo quoted. The station's quantum resonance array kept working until the final moment. Even as the station was destroyed, it was still boosting our fleet's capabilities. The loss of New Tokyo was a major blow. The station had been humanity's farthest outpost, a symbol of their expansion into space. More importantly, it had housed nearly 1 million civilians, most of whom had been evacuated, but thousands who chose to stay and fight. The Council is changing tactics, Intelligence Director Subin Lee added from her position at the briefing table. They're not just trying to defeat our military anymore, they're targeting our civilian populations, trying to break our will to resist. President Han stood and walked to the large screen showing the solar system. Human territories that had once glowed blue on the map were now contested zones marked in orange and red. Only Earth itself and the inner colonies remained fully under human control. What about the rebellion worlds? Are they still holding out? Most of them, Subin replied. But they're paying the same price we are. The Torhan homeworld has lost 3 major cities to orbital bombardment. The Merlani resistance is down to underwater bases on their ocean world. The Verdani are fighting a guerrilla war in their own forests. The numbers were staggering. Billions of beings across the galaxy were dying for the simple right to be free. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between crisis meetings, President Han wondered if they had made the right choice. Would it have been better to accept slavery and spare the galaxy this suffering? But then she would remember the alternative. A universe where freedom was something given and taken away by the powerful. A galaxy where entire species existed only to serve their betters. That wasn't life. That was just a slower form of death. Madam President, her chief advisor, Chang-Ho Lim, said quietly, "There's something else. We're receiving reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The Council is assembling something massive at the edge of their territory." The main display shifted to show long-range sensor readings. Even through the static and interference, the images were clear enough to make everyone in the room fall silent. "How many ships?" Admiral Hyunwoo asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer would be bad. "Conservative estimate? 20,000 vessels. They're calling it the Second Enforcement Fleet, but it's really an extermination force. Intelligence suggests they're not planning to occupy our territory this time. They're planning to sterilize it." President Han felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. Every man, woman, and child on Earth. Every human in the colonies. Every being across the galaxy who had dared to say no because humanity had shown them it was possible. How long do we have? 2 weeks, maybe 3. They're moving slowly, gathering ships from across their territory. When they arrive, they'll have enough firepower to crack planets. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the underground facility's life support systems. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity's first victory had been miraculous. But miracles didn't happen twice. 20,000 ships was more than the combined military force of the entire Rebel Alliance. There's more, Chang Ho continued reluctantly. Some of our colonial governors are asking about alternative options. You mean surrender, President Han said flatly. They're calling it negotiated settlement. Governor Eugene Kim on Mars. Colony sent a formal proposal yesterday. She suggests we could offer partial compliance with the original tribute demands in exchange for survival of the human species. Admiral Hyun-woo's face darkened. And what would that accomplish? We'd be slaves, but alive slaves. That's the argument, yes. Better to live on our knees than die on our feet. President Han turned back to the display showing the approaching Council fleet. Each ship represented millions of beings who had decided that human freedom was an intolerable threat to galactic order. They were coming not just to defeat humanity, but to erase the very idea that resistance was possible. "Get me a direct line to Governor Kim," she ordered. The communication took several minutes to establish through the quantum relay network. When Governor Kim's face appeared on the screen, President Han could see the strain of months of constant siege warfare. Mars colony had been under attack for weeks, and the governor looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Madam President," Governor Kim began immediately, "I'm glad you called. We need to discuss the proposal I sent. My people are dying here. Every day more council ships arrive in Martian space. We can't hold out much longer." "Eugene, President," Han said gently, "what do you think surrender would accomplish?" "It would save lives. Human lives. Maybe the council would be satisfied with partial compliance. Maybe they'd let some of us live. And the rest of the galaxy? The Torhans who started their rebellion because we showed them it was possible? The Merlani, who are fighting underwater battles because they believed in our example? The thousands of species who said no because we said it first?" Governor Kim was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "I can't save the galaxy, Madam President. I can only try to save my people. Your people chose this fight just like all of us did. They voted to support our refusal to pay tribute. They knew the risks. But they didn't know it would cost this much." President Han understood the governor's pain. She felt the same weight, the same guilt, the same desperate desire to find some solution that didn't require so much sacrifice. "Eugene, I want you to think about something. If we surrender now, even partially, what happens to the idea that freedom is worth fighting? What happens to every being in the galaxy who looked at humanity and decided they could be brave too?" Meanwhile, on Luna Base, Dr. Yoonji Choi was working frantically to understand the changes happening to the quantum resonance technology. The readings she was getting from across human space were unlike anything she had ever recorded. "Dr. Yoon," she called to her assistant, "look at these quantum field measurements. The resonance effect isn't just stronger, it's different, more complex." Dr. Kyung-ho Yoon studied the data streaming across his monitors. "It's like the field is learning from every battle, every act of resistance. Each time someone refuses to surrender, the technology adapts and grows stronger." "But there's something else," Yoonji said, highlighting a section of the data. "The field isn't just responding to human emotions anymore. I'm detecting quantum signatures from Torhan space, from the Merlani systems, from dozens of rebel worlds. Their determination to be free is feeding back into our technology. The implications were staggering. The quantum resonance technology had evolved beyond anything she had designed. It was no longer just human technology enhanced by human will. It had become something larger, a network of defiance that connected every being in the galaxy who refused to accept oppression. "What does this mean for the coming battle?" Dr. Yoon asked. "I don't know," Yoonji admitted. "We're dealing with forces beyond our understanding. But I can tell you this. If humanity falls, if we surrender or get destroyed, the quantum field will collapse. Every rebel world will lose the advantage that's been keeping them alive." Back in the command center, President Han was addressing the full cabinet and military leadership via hologram. Representatives from every human colony and military command listened as she spoke about the choice they all faced. "The second enforcement. Fleet will arrive in 2 weeks," she said simply. "When it does, we will face the largest military force in galactic history. Our chances of survival are minimal." She paused, looking at each face on the screens around her. "But I want to remind you all of something. 6 months ago, we faced impossible odds and won. Not because we were stronger or smarter or better equipped than our enemies. We won because we refused to accept defeat. We won because we said no and meant it." Governor Min-jae Park of Europa Colony raised his hand. "Madam President, with respect, this is different. 20,000 ships versus our few hundred. Mathematics has to matter at some point." "Mathematics says we should have lost the first battle, too," Admiral Hyunwoo interjected. "Mathematics doesn't account for the quantum field that Dr. Choi's team discovered. It doesn't account for the fact that every human ship becomes stronger when its crew refuses to give up. And it doesn't account for this," President Han added, gesturing to a new display that showed the galaxy-wide rebellion. "We're not fighting alone anymore. Every world that says no to the Council makes all of us stronger. Every being that chooses freedom over safety adds their will to ours." The debate continued for hours. Some argued for negotiation, others for evacuation to deep space, still others for a final desperate battle. But in the end, the decision came down to the same choice humanity had faced from the beginning. Accept slavery and live, or choose freedom and possibly die. When the vote was taken, it was unanimous. Humanity would face the second enforcement fleet with the same answer they had given to the Council's original demands. No. As the meeting ended and the holograms faded, President Han remained in the command center with her closest advisors. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the lights of the capital city where 8 billion people went about their lives knowing that in 2 weeks they might all be dead. "Chang-ho," she said quietly, "do you think we made the right choice?" Her advisor was quiet for a long moment. "Madam President, I think we made the only choice we could live with. Whether we're right or wrong, we'll find out soon enough." Admiral Hyun-woo stepped forward. "Ma'am, all fleet units are reporting ready status. Whatever's coming, we'll meet it together." President Han nodded, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. In 2 weeks, the galaxy would learn whether the word no was strong enough to survive annihilation. The countdown to humanity's final test had begun. The second enforcement fleet arrived on schedule, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of angry metal wasps. 20,000 ships formed a wall of destruction that stretched across space, blotting out entire star fields with their mass. Fleet Admiral Dong Hyun Song stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display as enemy contacts multiplied beyond counting. This time, humanity had managed to gather 400 ships from across their remaining territories. The odds were 50-1. "All ships report ready, Admiral," Commander Yejin Park announced from her station. "Quantum resonance technology is active across the entire fleet. Signal all vessels," Dong Hyun ordered, his voice calm despite the impossible situation. "This is Admiral Song to all human forces. Today we fight not just for our own freedom, but for the freedom of every being in the galaxy who has dared to say no to oppression." Across the solar system, human crews prepared for what might be their final battle. On the cruiser Soul's Vengeance, Captain Moon-Soo Park addressed his crew over the ship's communication system. "We all know the odds," he said simply. "We all know what we're facing. But we also know something our enemies don't understand. We know what it means to be free, and we know that some things are worth dying for." The Council Fleet Commander, Supreme War Leader Thalgon, broadcast his message on all frequencies. His species, the Dominion, were massive crystalline beings who had ruled their sector for millennia through pure military might. "Humans of soul," his voice boomed across space, translated into every language. "You have caused enough chaos. Your rebellion ends today. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Continue to resist, and we will make your species extinct slowly and painfully." Admiral Dong Hyun's response was broadcast not just to the Council fleet, but to every rebel world, every resistance cell, every being in the galaxy who was listening. "Supreme War Leader, this is Admiral Song of the Human Defense Forces. We have one word for you, the same word we've given every demand for our surrender: no." What happened next changed the galaxy forever. Dr. Yoonji Choi, monitoring from her laboratory deep beneath Luna's surface, watched in amazement as quantum readings spiked across her instruments. But these weren't just readings from human ships. Energy signatures were appearing from everywhere. Torhan space, Merlani systems, Verdani territories, dozens of worlds where rebellions were still fighting. "Dr. Yoon," she called excitedly, "the quantum field is activating simultaneously across the entire galaxy. Every being who's said no to the Council, every act of defiance, every moment of courage is feeding into the network." On his bridge, Admiral Dong Hyun felt it happening. It started as a warm sensation, like sunlight filling his chest. Then it grew stronger, connecting him not just to his own crew, not just to the human fleet, but to every free being in the galaxy. He could sense the Torhan miners on Kepler 442b, still fighting their overseers after months of rebellion. He could feel the Merlani resistance fighters hiding in their ocean depths. He could touch the minds of the Verdani guerrillas defending their forest homes. All of them were connected. All of them were saying the same word in 1,000 different languages. No. The Council fleet attacked with overwhelming force. 20,000 ships unleashed enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. Energy beams that could crack moons converged on the human defensive line. Missiles carrying planet-killer warheads streaked through space in numbers that darkened the void. But something impossible happened. The human ships didn't just absorb the attack, they grew stronger from it. Every weapon that struck their hulls fed energy back into the quantum field. Every attempt to destroy them only made them more determined to survive. Captain Moon-Soo Park watched in wonder as his cruiser's hull began to glow with blue-white light. New weapon systems were growing from the ship's superstructure like living tissue, Armor plating was forming over critical areas without any input from his engineering crew. "Captain," his chief engineer reported, his voice filled with awe. "Our ship is rebuilding itself. Systems we never installed are coming online. We're operating at power levels that should be impossible." Across the system, the same transformation was occurring on every human vessel. But more than that, the ships were beginning to work together in ways that defied explanation. Vessels on opposite sides of the solar system coordinated their movements perfectly. Weapons fired in patterns that created devastating crossfires across millions of kilometers of space. Supreme War Leader Thalgon watched his tactical displays with growing horror. His overwhelming fleet was taking massive casualties, while the humans seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. "Over 8,000, Supreme War Leader," his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "The humans have lost fewer than 50 vessels. Their technology is adapting to our attacks faster than we can modify our strategy." But the true miracle was yet to come. On Earth, President Mi-Young-han stood in the command center watching the battle unfold through long-range sensors. The quantum field readings were beyond anything they had ever recorded. The network of defiance that connected every free being in the galaxy was reaching a critical threshold. "Madam President," Dr. Yunji's voice came through the communication. "System from Luna Base. Something unprecedented is happening. The quantum field isn't just enhancing our technology anymore. It's beginning to affect the fundamental laws of physics in local space." The turning point came when Supreme War Leader Thalgon, desperate to break the human defense, ordered his flagship to target Earth directly with a planet-killing weapon. The massive beam weapon charged up, drawing power from the ship's core reactor and the reactors of 50 support vessels. "All human forces," Admiral Dong Hyun broadcast across the fleet. "The enemy is targeting our homeworld. Every human in the system, focus your will on one thing: protecting Earth." As the devastating energy beam lanced toward humanity's homeworld, something that had never happened before in the history of the galaxy occurred. 8 billion human minds, supported by the collective will of trillions of beings across the galaxy who had chosen freedom over slavery, focused on a single thought: no. The beam stopped, simply stopped, as if it had struck an invisible wall made of pure determination. The energy that should have boiled Earth's oceans and shattered its continents hung motionless in space, held back by nothing more than the absolute refusal of free beings to accept their destruction. "Impossible," Supreme War Leader Thalgon whispered, staring at his displays. Admiral Dong Hyun's voice carried across space, reaching not just the Council fleet but every listening post, every rebel world, every enslaved species in the galaxy. "You want to destroy our world? No. You want to break our will? No. You want us to bow to your tyranny? No. And that word, that simple word, is backed by every free being in the galaxy." What followed wasn't a battle anymore. It was a transformation. The quantum field that had started as humanity's desperate attempt to level the playing field had evolved into something that changed the fundamental nature of conflict itself. Council. Ships found their weapons refusing to fire, their engines shut down without explanation. Their computer systems displayed the same message in every known language. We said no. Some Council crews, inspired by what they were witnessing, began to turn on their own commanders. The Alterian Third Fleet, the same force that had demanded humanity's initial surrender, broadcast their surrender to Admiral Dong Hyun. "Human Admiral," their commander said, We have seen enough. Our species chooses to stand with freedom rather than oppression. One by one, council ships began switching sides or simply withdrawing from the battle. The mighty Second Enforcement Fleet, assembled to crush humanity and end the Galactic Rebellion, crumbled not from superior firepower, but from the simple power of an idea. The idea that freedom was worth fighting for. The idea that no being should have to live on their knees. The idea that a single word, spoken with enough conviction, could change everything. 3 days later, Supreme War Leader Thalgon stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet. Of the 20,000 ships he had brought, to destroy humanity, fewer than 2,000 remained. Most had been destroyed, disabled, or had simply switched sides. Human Admiral, he transmitted to the Indomitable, I request terms of surrender. Admiral Dong-hyun's response was broadcast across the galaxy. Supreme War Leader, we don't want your surrender. We want your freedom. The age of the Council's tyranny is over. The age of free beings working together as equals has begun. 6 months later, President Mi Young-han stood in the same chamber where humanity had once faced judgment from the Galaxy Council. But now it was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all equals in what they were calling the Free Worlds Alliance. The former council chambers had been transformed into a meeting place where species that had been enemies for millennia sat side by side, working together to build a new galactic civilization based on freedom rather than domination. Admiral Hyun-woo, now serving as the Alliance's military coordinator, approached with the day's reports. Trade agreements between former enemies, joint exploration missions to unexplored sectors, cultural exchange programs, scientific cooperation that was advancing knowledge faster than ever before. Ma'am, he said, the former Altarian ambassador is requesting a meeting with you. They want to discuss a formal apology for their species' role in the old system. President Han smiled, remembering the arrogant demand for tribute that had started everything. Send them in, but remind them that we don't hold grudges. We're all building the future together now. As she prepared for the meeting, President Han reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple word: no. One word that had transformed not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The Council's 1,000-year reign had ended not with conquest or revenge, but with the spread of an idea. The idea that every being had the right to be free. The idea that freedom was not something that could be given or taken away by others, but something that existed in the very act of refusing to surrender it. Looking out at the bustling chamber filled with representatives of species that had once been slaves or masters, President Han felt a deep satisfaction. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their absolute refusal to accept that freedom was negotiable. The word that had started it all still echoed among the stars, but now it carried a different meaning. No longer just a refusal, but a promise. A promise that as long as free beings stood together, no force in the universe could make them kneel. The galaxy had been transformed by a single word, and that word would never be forgotten. No,